Welcome to the Inside Track on Real Estate, and today I am here with Paul Battle, and we're going to talk with an expert on asbestos, electromagnetic fields, and radon, the house doc. Pretty fun. So Paul, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And so tell me a little bit about your company.
My company, The House Doc, I've been in business for about 18 years, doing primarily residential indoor air quality, electromagnetic field inspections.
Yep.
Got into it through personal issues of environmental sensitivities with family members, and wanted to get training on how to create a healthy house for ourselves.
And so now you're taking and helping everybody else create a healthy
helping
house.
everybody else with it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you deal with more than mold. I mean, I think a lot of times when I say house doc, people think you're just a mold dude.
And you're the mold guy.
Right.
And I'm like,
you do more than that.
More than
me or everybody else, right?
Yeah.
So asbestos.
Yeah, asbestos is it's an up and coming issue in the real estate industry in particular,
insurance
and insurance. And the reason being is in 2007, Ontario government, the Occupational Health and Safety Act, came up with new guidelines on asbestos removal.
Okay.
So
much stricter.
Much stricter because the workers, contractors are going into an old plastered house and bashing the plaster down to do a renovation, and the fibers get into the air. They're extremely sharp, needle-like pieces of asbestos that will scar lung tissue, and that over a long period of time that can create mesothelioma, so lung cancer.
So lath and plaster.
So yeah, there's a huge amount of materials in a house that can contain asbestos, and just because those materials are in the house doesn't mean that it's dangerous at all. Okay. Because it was used. It's an amazing material. I mean, this is a mined material that has incredible properties for insulating and heat retention and structural reinforcing. So in plaster, it was used after they used horsehair as a way to stop cracking in plaster.
Okay.
So it was added to the plaster. So you're going to have varying amounts in plaster.
Right. And what sort of era or what time frame would a house have been built if it was likely going to contain asbestos in the plaster? Well,
it can be anywhere from the early 50s into the early 70s.
Okay, so not so much in the 1800s or in the early 1900s.
No, not so much.
Because they were using
horsehair for plaster, and they didn't really use asbestos.
So the asbestos was more of a thing that started being mined sort of in the 50s, and by the 70s we kind of stopped.
The heat pads that your mother used to, the asbestos gloves.
They were. You're
there
right.
Was products for babies. It was used everywhere.
And that was through the 50s to the 70s.
Yeah.
Primarily. Like that 20-year period.
Yeah. So and even into even into the 70s with sheet vinyl flooring in kitchens. Okay. I mean, almost every sample of older sheet vinyl flooring contains 10 to 50% asbestos fibers.
And how dangerous is that?
Not dangerous at all, because it's encapsulated in the vinyl backings on both sides of it.
Okay.
So
asbestos isn't always dangerous. When I hear asbestos, it makes me, a little nervous.
And that's what I'm finding with people. So when people are asking me to come in and do an asbestos survey on a house in pre-purchase, I can't drill holes in walls as much as I'd like to and send samples away. If I can get special permission, maybe we can, get some samples, but we're not sampling the required amount if they were going to do a renovation.
Right.
Because there are very strict guidelines on how to sample and where to sample and how much.
Okay.
So the key about of asbestos is if it has to be removed and it is above 0.5% content, then it has to be done professionally.
Okay.
And you need a very specific license to do that and training. And it's like, think of the white suits and containment areas that mold cleaning would be doing, only they're even stricter.
Okay. And we hear vermiculite all the time, which was a naturally mined insulation.
Yeah.
used around the same time frame, or when was that used?
That can actually be earlier. So you could have vermiculite from the 30s, 40s, all the way up into the mid 70s.
Okay, so about a 40-year, 45-year span.
Yeah, think of the little silvery bits in your potted plants.
Right.
That's perlite or sometimes vermiculite.
Okay.
Okay, and it's a mined mineral. It's a rock that when they heat it, it pops. It expands like a popcorn.
Okay.
And it gets dead airspace, so that becomes an insulator.
And so does all vermiculite have asbestos in it?
No. I would say roughly 60% of the vermiculite used in our area, I'm in Ottawa, would contain asbestos. And it came from primarily the Libby mine in Montana.
Okay, and higher than 0.5 when it contains it?
Yeah, but the percentage is, if I get a sample back from the lab and it says 1%, that's roughly 1% for that sample. It doesn't mean the entire attic contains 1%. It could be below that or it could be above that.
So what does that tell you?
It tells me that we don't really care about the 0.5% guideline when we're doing vermiculite. We care whether it's positive or negative, simply.
So if it has any at all, we're concerned.
We're concerned only if it's to be disturbed.
Okay, so if it's being left alone...
If it's being left alone, but on a real estate purchase, if you have a layer of fiberglass insulation and then somebody's come in and added the vermiculite on top and it's only R20 and you want to bring it up to R40, it's not a good idea to insulate on top of that vermiculite.
Okay. So then you have to take out
if it contains asbestos.
Right, and there's a 60% chance it does.
A 60% chance it does. The other type is called mica fill. Sometimes when we're doing these inspections, you'll actually find the bags in the attic. And mica fill is a totally different color than zonolite. And mica fill is larger particles and they're cream colored and there's lots of shiny mica on it. And the bags will say mica fill. That comes from South Africa.
And mica fill is fine.
Mica fill is fine.
It doesn't have asbestos.
Yeah. And what you have to be careful about, particularly for real estate agents in the past used to do collections themselves around the attic hatch, and they would just open the hatch and scoop a bit. The asbestos rocks are heavier than the vermiculite, so they float, so they will sift to the bottom. So when you do a collection, you need to first make sure that it's the same material all throughout the attic, because this was often poured in by homeowners. So they would go to the hardware store, buy a few bags, and it might be 2 bags of mica fill and 6 bags of zonolite.
Okay.
So you might be looking at mica fill around the attic hatch, but there's zonolite further in.
I know when I've done it, which has been a long time since I've done any of that, but is I would attempt to crawl across all the beams and try and go to 4 or 5 or 6 different spots throughout the attic.
That's the proper way to do it.
But
you'd be wearing a full face respirator and a Tyvek suit.
Right.
Because you're exposing, it's a highly friable material, easily airborne.
And especially if it turns out to have asbestos in it.
Yeah, you want to protect yourself.
So now the other area I think I've seen a lot of asbestos is around ductwork.
Yes.
Where there's a little wrap. How dangerous is that to get rid of?
Well, again, if it's disturbed, then it's dangerous in the removal. But by itself, sitting there, if it's not exposed to direct airflow, and that's part of the problem with it, you'll see it in the basements on the ducting.
Exactly.
And it could be encapsulated at a point. You could just paint over it and seal it. Then it's not going to release any fibers. But it's also, if you find it there, it's going to be on the boots where they pass up. So the heat boots where they come to the registers. You pull the register off from the top and you'll see the white edge of asbestos sticking up. That's getting some exposure to airflow. So if you're going to disturb it, it needs to be done professionally, removed.
Okay, so pretty dangerous.
Yeah, again, when it's being disturbed.
Okay.
Not when it's there by itself. Or if it's old and it's drying up and falling off the ducting, then yes.
Okay. And I think the insurance companies, at least that's been my experience, they're getting much more regimental about the whole process, and they really don't want it in the house.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm seeing that happen, that They're requesting people remove it.
Yeah, like homes that were purchased 6, 7, 8 years ago, we sold them. Everybody realized there was vermiculite in the attic. A couple of samples were tested. Even if it came back with low levels, nobody was concerned about it because they just didn't bother it. And now that same home is a concern.
Yeah, and the other concern is the way that it was tested at the lab.
Right.
Because there's 2 or 3 different methods for asbestos. Okay. And one of the main ways is called PLM, polarized light microscopy. PLM can give false negatives because the detection limit only goes down to 0.1%. So if I see a material that I suspect to contain asbestos, I'll instruct the lab to do PLM first. If they find it, good. If they don't, then they have to process that material further by grinding it and wet floating it and drying out the sludge, and they look at the sludge. So they're lowering the detection limit, and then they'll find it.
If it's there.
Well, yeah. Again, it's because of my experience level. If I see, I know.
You know by looking at it?
I know by looking at it.
Okay.
I know by looking at it.
So I can just bring you samples? I'll email them to you whenever I find one?
I still do the lab work, so I cover cover myself. But yeah, I can look. I've done enough sampling over the years to know which ones are going to come back and which ones aren't going to come back.
Yeah. So you can pretty much tell the homeowner at the inspection.
I always tell them I strongly suspect it will, or I strongly suspect it won't.
Right, and you're probably right pretty much every time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. That's awesome. So another reason to call Paul.
Yeah.
Now, electromagnetic fields.
Yes, big subject.
It's gotten huge.
I'll narrow it down because you're talking about the electromagnetic spectrum.
Yeah.
But what that's everything from the low, resonance frequencies of the Earth all the way up to ionizing radiation.
Okay.
Sunlight is on there.
Okay.
But with houses, we're primarily talking about our household wiring.
Yep.
It produces AC, alternating current, magnetic fields, electric fields, and high frequency from cell phone towers, Wi-Fi systems, microwave towers. Those are the 2 main groupings for electromagnetic fields.
Okay, and what about the big high tension wires?
Yeah, well, high tension wires, again, that you would still call that, I would still put that into the household wiring.
Oh, would you?
It's 60 hertz. Yeah.
Okay.
So our electrical supply
outside
system produces, when you're running electricity through a single conductor, it induces a magnetic field around it.
Right.
If you have 2 conductors, as in the hot and neutral that are in your walls, those fields collapse and balance each other out. Okay. If you have a wiring error in the house where it puts them out of balance, then you have a high magnetic field.
Okay.
You can have a high magnetic field from the grounding bond in a city house. So there is a connection between the electrical panel and the water service that is part of the shock protection for the house.
Right.
In older neighborhoods, all of the electricity doesn't return back up to the pole because it can take this path of least resistance through the water pipes, and now you get an imbalance.
And that creates a health issue?
Well, that's debatable.
Okay.
It's still controversial with electromagnetic fields, but it will affect our circadian rhythms when we sleep at night.
Okay. By
suppressing our body's natural production of melatonin and different hormones. So it affects our sleeping patterns. There is a correlation between some of the, like melatonin in particular, being able to fight cancer cells. So it's not necessarily that electromagnetic fields cause cancer, but that they can increase the risk of it and increase the growth of it.
Because you're reducing your body's own ability to fight things.
Yeah. And that's why the bedroom is the most important place.
Okay. So what does it look like to find this?
Well, you're not going to see anything.
Right.
Right. So you have to measure it using different types of meters for the frequency that you're looking for. So for magnetic fields, it's called a Gauss meter.
Okay.
And you're measuring, and you have to, move around the house and turn things on and off and energize circuits and maybe shut the entire power down to the house and see if there's any changes. Okay. Is it an ambient field from outside or is it from inside the house?
Okay.
And what you want to try to do is be able to sleep as field-free as possible.
Okay. So if you're just joining us now on the inside track, you'll want to go back to the first half because we talked about asbestos. Asbestos and vermiculite and all, whether it does or does not contain asbestos. And so that was an incredibly valuable whole segment on that. And then we began the topic of electromagnetic fields. And we're going to continue that a little bit more. So I'm here with Paul Battle from the House Doc, thehousedoc.ca. And I've got to remember to say the House Doc.
Yes.
Because if we just say House Doc, we're not going to find you.
No.
All right. And there's lots of information on his site about these, plus lots of other related topics. So, Paul, electromagnetic fields, they really have become the buzz in our industry.
Yeah. So when I first trained, I got very excited about testing electromagnetic fields. I felt it was the missing link. We are electrical chemical beings, and we knew about all these air quality issues, but there really wasn't a lot out there on the effects of electromagnetic fields. So I started my business only with electromagnetic fields.
Okay.
And it just didn't work.
It didn't work? People were not that excited about it?
People were not ready for it. But I've seen quite an increase lately, and I'm getting calls from people that are experiencing issues. And one of the main issues is actually from our prevalence of Wi-Fi systems.
Okay.
So we're
non-hardwired
technological
stuff.
junkies,
Yep.
and everything that's new that comes out, we want to try it. There isn't a lot of long-term testing being done, maybe in Europe, but not so much, in Canada. So I have a Wi-Fi system. When we have more than one computer, going, it's turned on, but we never sleep with it on. We turn it off, and that's the key: is to turn it off when you're not using it. So if your computer supply comes in on, or your internet comes in on DSL through the phone lines or cable, it can come to your modem, either hardwired to a computer, which it is in my case,
right,
or it's broadcasting through a router. If it's broadcasting through a router, the only way to turn it off is to unplug the whole thing, let it collapse for the night, and then let it power back up.
And that's intelligent to do?
You can do that way. I prefer to have it set up to my main computer. So on my main computer, if I'm working away, my wife comes in and asks me to turn the Wi-Fi on, I just go in, turn it on, and 20 seconds later, it's broadcasting. And then when she's done, we'll turn it off.
So that you're not exposing yourself needlessly.
Yeah, so when I turn it on, then all my calendars and iCloud stuff update, and I'm happy that I have just as many devices as everybody else, but I'm not sleeping with them on.
Okay. And they go through the whole house.
They go through the whole house, and the higher the frequency, the more biological effect it will have on it. So we're up into the gigahertz with these systems.
Wow.
So it's quite a agitating, and it will affect your sleeping patterns. Just try turning it off.
Wow, it's that simple.
That simple. Unplug things around your bed to take care of the magnetic field. That may be simplifying things a little bit too much because it depends on how the house wiring and all that, but certainly with Wi-Fi. And you might not be able to get away from it if you live in an apartment building or close to other people, because they're not turning theirs off. So if you use your phone, and you can see how many Wi-Fi signals you can pick up. I can go into some places and there's 10 signals, strong signals. So if
you can't do much about that.
People with environmental sensitivities, quite a few of them have sensitivities to electricity.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Wi-Fi is a significant issue with that.
So electromagnetic fields, what else do people need to know besides watch their Wi-Fi?
Well, the bedroom should be a sanctuary. Okay. The bedroom should be as if you were living close to Mother Earth, sleeping in a tent or in the cabin in the woods. You don't want to have big screen TVs and clock radios and all of these electronic devices with a metal bed and metal bed frame. You want to be sleeping as field-free as possible.
Okay.
That's a big key.
So wood furniture is better than metal furniture.
Wood furniture, natural latex mattresses, slatted bed to allow it to breathe. Not that it has anything to do with electromagnetic fields, but don't make the bed first thing in the morning
Explain that.
because of humidity that's in the we shed skin cells at night with this humid environment. You're going to have lots of little critters growing in that bed.
Oh, that's kind of disgusting, Paul.
It is disgusting.
And yet it's normal, right?
It's normal. Yeah.
And so
Dust mites.
now it gives me a reason not to make the bed anymore.
Let it breathe, let it air out.
Okay.
Yep. And then you can make it later on.
No.
No,
You just
leave
gave
it
me a
messy.
reason to leave it messy. I like it. So another topic I know we want to cover is radon gas.
Yes. Kind of still in the electromagnetic field spectrum, but also in the air quality spectrum. It's a combination of both. So radon is, it's part of the natural release or the breakdown of uranium in soils or rock. Yeah. So given that we're on Canadian Shield up here, or scraped off Canadian Shield, there's quite a bit of pockets of radon in our area.
Right.
And what happens is radon is a single molecule. It will migrate towards a low pressure zone. So if we build a house and we dig a hole into an area where there's rock or rock underneath, and when we're heating that house, we're creating a stack effect of rising heated air, puts a negative pressure and puts a bit of suction. You can think of it as a giant vacuum cleaner.
Okay.
And it's sucking in, radon will migrate to that low pressure. So it'll seep in through cracks in the slab, or through sump holes, or through the foundation slab joint, because it's poured separate and it separates from the house.
Yep.
Then that radon will be at a higher concentration in the basement than upper floors.
Right.
But it still gets transferred to the upper floors. And in the wintertime, we have our houses closed up. Some of us might have air exchangers, but an air exchanger isn't going to completely get rid of it.
Okay, it'll help though.
It'll help. It'll reduce it somewhat.
Right.
What happens with radon is it has a half-life of about 2 days, the gas. When we're breathing that gas in and out of our lungs, it can release ionizing radiation as part of its next breakdown in the chain. So that radiation scars the lung tissues.
Okay. So
and that's why it's associated with lung cancer as the second highest cause of lung cancer in North America.
So now what do I have to do? Because it's reasonably prevalent in the city.
There are definitely pockets.
Right.
Yep.
And so what do I have to do if I want to protect my lungs?
Well, the first thing is to, again, not panic about it. It's a long-term issue. So just because you've been exposed to it for a couple of years we don't know.
Right.
Really. We really don't know.
Right.
But the first thing is to do some testing. So as a homeowner, your best bet is to do your own test. You don't need to hire myself as a professional to do that. You can do a long-term test if you're living in your own house. You do a 90-day test or more over the winter.
And where do you
can buy test kits online. You can get them at some hardware stores now.
Okay.
They're quite prevalent.
And they take 90 days to read?
Yeah, it's just a device that is either absorbing radon gas or creating tracks across materials, and that gets sent to a lab.
Okay.
And it's relatively inexpensive, probably around $50 to get that done.
Okay.
And that will give you an average. You can also buy devices that you can plug into the wall, much like a carbon monoxide detector in your hall. And that will read, since the last time you set it, what the average is. So you can do ongoing testing. Although against a wall is not the best place to do the reading from, just because of how air currents move.
It's better in the middle of a room or something.
Better in the middle of a room, up off the floor, and not directly under the register that's pumping a lot of air past it. So you have to, and those directions will be in the kit.
Right.
If you do have high radon, then you can look at different options to reduce it. And the best way to reduce it is called subslab depressurization.
Okay.
So
that sounds fancy.
It sounds
and
fancy, but
complicated.
it's pretty simple, actually.
Okay.
If you think of the concrete pour in the basement, underneath that, in relatively recent home construction, is a layer of gravel.
Right.
that gravel is perforated, that it will allow radon to move through it. So if you drill a hole, if they, the company will come in, drill a hole, and put in a suction system just using a fan. The fan is designed to put more pressure on that underneath the slab than is from the house stack effect. Then the radon goes to there and gets thrown outside.
Oh.
Really simple.
That is simple.
It is simple.
So it's not costly.
It's not costly to do. Might be $2,000 to $2,500 to put in a system with the testing.
Okay.
If they thought about it prior to building, they could just put in a couple of pipes and you're ready to go. Hook it up to a fan.
And do you know if that's happening in some of the higher risk areas?
There are builders that are starting to put in radon systems. Just starting now. Health Canada, maybe 3 years ago, reduced Canada's action limit. So the awareness is becoming higher, and they're mapping, doing projects of mapping the country and seeing where these radon pockets are.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And where would they go to find that kind of information if they're in an area of high risk?
Health Canada would be their website for radon. If they do a search for Health Canada radon, would be probably the best information.
Okay.
And CMHC has some good information, and EPA in the States doesn't do the mapping for here, but they've got some other good information.
And EPA stands for?
Environmental Protection Agency. So I have links to all of those on my website.
Okay. So just go to thehousedoc.ca.
Yeah.
And you got everything you need.
So the other thing with radon that I do is short-term testing. Okay. So if you're making a purchase in an area that, we'll use Canada as an example because there's, some areas in Canada that do have high radon.
Yep.
And it hasn't already had a test, or you want a second test done, but you're making a decision on the house. That's when the type of equipment that I use, which are data loggers, come into play. And I can I need 48 hours to get enough data to be 85 to 90% accurate over that 90 versus a 90-day test.
Wow.
Especially in the winter.
Okay.
Not so much in the summer. If I do a test in the summer, it's not going to be anywhere near as accurate because you don't have that stack effect.
Okay. And what sort
I can
of...
still tell whether there's going to be elevated radon versus none there, but I can't tell the exact level that you'd be exposed to.
And what sort of cost is somebody looking at for that?
For me, the cost would be about $250 to do that.
Okay. And are you doing that in conjunction with some of the other testing that you're doing, or are you just doing the radon?
When the radon is done on a 48-hour, it's done as a separate. But often when I'm doing a whole house inspection, I will run the equipment short term to see if there's potential there.
If you're there anyway.
If I'm there anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, quick property I do want to feature, because I promise I'm going to do this every time. Have a great property on Prince of Wales, just outside Manotick. Beautiful, newer construction, 2-story, $400,000. That is a bargain, sitting on a couple of acres surrounded by cornfields. So wouldn't probably have a lot of issues from other people's electromagnetic fields.
No, perfect.
You just got to have a clean bill of health in yours.
A well system means no grounding bond between the water service, too.
So a well system reduces some issues.
Yes, it does.
Hey, did you hear that? You're hearing it here first. Well, maybe not first, but anyway, you're hearing here that a well system has lots of advantages, even beyond the ones you might think about from a cost perspective. So thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate, Paul.
You're welcome.
It has been an amazing educational opportunity. Yeah.
I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and hopefully all of you have enjoyed it too. So thanks for joining us on the Inside Track on Real Estate. We've been here with Paul Battle and, of course, the Dekker team. So if you'd like to get more information, go to thehousedoc.ca or DekkerTeam.com. Have an amazing day, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for joining us on the Inside Track with the Dekker team. Bye-bye.